the Russians and the Chinese and others have taken a completely opposing view, and they are spending billions of dollars about hoarding gold and silver. So someone has to be right. And when you look at the history of money, fiat currencies, fiat currencies don't last. They always go back to their intrinsic value of zero because politicians and bureaucrats print too much of it. And I have to say personally, I mean, I was a very big supporter of Trump in the campaign. If you go back to the first presidential debate, what did he say? We have a big, fat, ugly bubble. Well, what did he tweet out on the weekend? Quantitative tightening was a disaster. Had we, gone with continued QE, the stock market would be up another 5 or 10% without inflation. Well, I don't understand what's happened to your president. I mean, see, has he been compromised? Was he lying in the first debate when he said there was a big fat ugly bubble? Because obviously the bubble has increased significantly under his watch. But no, something has happened with Trump.
Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest tonight. This is John Adams. He's the chief economist at GoodAsGold Australia. He's also the founder of AdamsEconomics.com, where you'll see some more articles posted by him on some of the topics we're going to talk about tonight. John, thanks for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, sir. How are you going today?
Very good. How are you?
Doing well.
We had quite an enthusiastic response to our first visit with you about a month ago when you came to talk on about the coming collapse of Australia. There were quite a few people who hadn't considered or hadn't heard that aspect of what had happened during the last global financial crisis in 2008-2009, and were quite interested in hearing about your real estate market rolling over and some of the high exposure, which is uncharacteristic of Australia, to both sovereign debt and now household debt as well. So before we met with you last time, we talked about another phenomenon, which is the strength of the Bank of Australia and their position in holding physical gold. And one of the topics you were concerned about and have been for some time is what has been happening to the responsibility or irresponsibility of the custodianship of Australia's gold and the true holdings. And it sounds like you've riled that topic up to where it's actually been officially addressed by the Bank of Australia recently. Could you take us into what got you concerned about where has Australia's gold gone and what we're finding out now about what the truth is behind that?
Sure. So my partner and I last year, Martin North, we did a series of videos about the Reserve Bank of Australia, which is our central bank, and the gold holdings. I mean, it's been something I've been tracking. As I've been getting more into studying about, all the things you've been talking about with a lot of your guests around a new financial crisis, the role of gold, the role of silver, the monetary system. You come across a lot of material, and I saw quite a few videos around, rumors around what's happening with the bullion banks in London, what's happening with the Bank of England, a whole bunch of gold being melted down, sold through leased to the bullion banks, then sold to refiners in Switzerland, melted down, recast, and sold to the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Turks, etc. So, you hear these rumors. And basically, there have been certain individuals in Australia who have tried to pursue more details about gold with the Reserve Bank, and they've done freedom of information requests and tried to find out. But last year I thought, well, the Reserve Bank in their annual report said that they've leased 11 tons of gold. So the Reserve Bank has 80 tons in total. 99.9% of the gold is in the Bank of England, according to our central bank. We had, just like with a number of Western countries, we sold off about 167 tons in the late 90s, and we had roughly about 250 tons of gold. We reduced that down to about 80. It was something in that order. And so the 80 tons, 99.9% of it's not in the country. According to the annual report, 11 tons of that is leased. And so when I heard these rumors about leasing, I thought, well, why not do a video about it? And then it took a life of its own. So the first video we did with Martin North was around help John Adams find Australia's 11 tons of missing gold, and this was all about the leasing conspiracy. And we had we had a video from Eric Sprott when he spoke about this several years ago on camera. And all the rumors around, that gold annual production can't keep up with the demand of Chinese and what the Swiss refiners are talking to. And, there's a number of people have been talking quite a bit about this, Egon von Greyers, Jim Rickards, etc. So, yes, so we basically did one video, and that got a lot of attention. Then I was sent some documents about So our gold's been out of the country for at least 20 years, maybe more. And there's only been one audit, and that was done in 2013. So we got some documents about that particular audit, and we did a video about that. And a lot of Australians were completely unaware where our gold was. That the fact that we've only done one audit in 20 years, the audit was completely flawed. So so basically the Reserve Bank got bombarded with emails from around the country saying what's happened to our gold, why won't you bring it back, why won't you release the audit report. So the audit report from the 2013 audit has not been released. There's been requests to release it. The Reserve Bank said that if they release it, it may damage relations with the Bank of England, so therefore they will not release the audit report. But they say, trust us, the gold is there. Even though the methodology of the audit was completely flawed, and we sort of exposed several elements of the flawed methodology. It took a life of its own, and the Reserve Bank responded by creating a new web page, because before then they really had no information on the official website about gold. So they created a new web page, and we'll put that up for the viewers to have a look. And they put up a web page about our gold holdings. So they came up with 5 questions and came up with 5 official responses. So that was a good first step. They provided some additional information that gave people some more ideas about what was going on. But since then, the Reserve Bank governor himself was asked at a public forum in November about gold, about the Reserve Bank, what they're doing. Is there an intention to bring the gold back? And on that occasion, the Reserve Bank governor lied on the public record. And so we now know that, just to give an example, so he said that we do regular checks of our gold. That's a categorically false statement. The only physical check they've done is in 2013, and that audit was completely flawed. So there's we don't have unfettered access to the Bank of England. We can't just walk in there and say, okay, we're going to give you a random list of serial numbers on the bars, produce them, we want to see them, show us that you haven't secretly leased our gold to the bullion banks, and that the gold is missing. So we can't do that. So when the Reserve Bank governor said that we do regular checks, a categorical lie, but basically he was able to get away with that. And then the RBA was fronted in front of a committee of Parliament in February. So the chairman of the committee reached out to me and asked if I could put together a few questions so the committee could ask questions of the RBA. So I did that. They asked some questions, and we got some very wonky answers from the Reserve Bank on that occasion as well. So so the status of where this is the gold is not in Australia. A lot of Australians who've now become aware of this issue through sort of my videos want the gold back. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of murkiness around not only our gold, but a whole host of other countries' gold around the world, and this is why a whole host of countries have requested their gold back, whether it's Venezuela or Germany or Hungary or the Netherlands or even Turkey, etc. But the government has officially said, and when I say the government, the governor himself has officially said there is no intention to bring the gold back. So where to from here? So I don't think there's any interest on behalf of Parliament to do anything about this. But there is a supposed new audit of our gold coming up in July this year. So I think there'll be some questions for the Reserve Bank to show the public what they found in this audit. But they still haven't shown us what they found last time, and I think they will, with the help of the mainstream media, try to hide what they find in the upcoming audit.
It's interesting. I'm going to mention to folks, as you said, that we're going to put a link to that article that you described, the new web page on the Bank of Australia's official website. And those 5 questions are quite interesting. The first one talking about how much gold does the Reserve Bank hold. And as you mentioned, the 80 tons. What it doesn't say in there is that that's less than a third of what it had a few decades ago. Secondly, where is the Reserve Bank's gold stored? And it does mention that same figure, 99.9% stored in the Bank of England. And it goes on to talk up the wonderful Bank of England and why that's the best place in the world to store gold. And then talking about, does RBA earn income from its gold? And it talks about how it's loaned out. And that's the fourth one. How does our RBA lend gold, and the lending rates and so on? And who does the gold? Fifth one is, who does RBA lend the gold to? Is that one of your concerns, that once you open the door to this notion that you're going to be leasing or lending out a portion of your gold, you really have lost control over what the reality, the physical reality is on the ground of what's happening with your gold?
Sure. Well, look, I don't think the Reserve Bank has full control over the gold. When they say that they lease, just to give an example. So the question is, well, why is the gold in England, and why can't the gold come back to Australia? So they have said the world gold market is in London. The best place to engage in gold transactions, whether it's to buy, to sell, or to lease, is in London. So therefore, because that's the most efficient place to do it, we're not going to bring the gold back. Well, so since 1997. The Reserve Bank in almost 21, 22 years has not bought any gold, has not sold any gold. We've held the 80 tons, but we have engaged in leasing. Now, the Deputy Governor in February in front of Parliament made one of the most extraordinary claims that he could have made. He said, when we lease the gold, as in the Reserve Bank, the gold physically does not move. He said that basically, because he says that the gold can be chipped, you start to lose, you create gold dust, and all of these sort of claims, and he says the gold doesn't move. So therefore, when we lease, basically someone takes custodian control over that gold, but then we basically get the gold returned to us, basically in terms of the same sort of bars. Now, that's a highly problematic statement, because one is, if you lease and the gold physically doesn't have to move, well, why can't we lease out of Sydney? Yep. Why can't we bring the gold back to Sydney? Or we've got multiple locations in Australia where the gold can be. So if the gold physically doesn't have to move, there's no reason why we can't have gold here. Now, all the parties, so these are private sector, financial and non-financial corporates, they've said to me via email that they lease to, but they've said that every commercial partner we have has a office or has a presence here in Australia. So it could be JP Morgan, they have an office here in Sydney. It could be Deutsche Bank, they have a presence here in Australia. It could be Bank of America, for example, etc. So so if every counterparty we have has an office in Australia, well, why can't that office either use their local staff or fly in one of their local or one of their international people into Australia to actually do a physical inspection of the gold if they want to do leasing? So this whole notion that the gold doesn't move is one, it gives no justification for why the gold can't be in Australia, number one. But number two is they have absolutely no way to prove the gold doesn't move. Now, in 20 years, they've walked into the vault once. And on that occasion, in this 2013 audit, they had an opportunity to do a what they call a non-random audit. So what that means was that at least 6 weeks in advance, they had to give specific bar numbers to the Bank of England to audit, and then they said, well, we will, when you walk into the vault, we will produce the numbers that you've requested ahead of time. Now, the Bank of England said that this was all about efficiency. So we have a lot of gold, we have a lot of serial numbers, we have limited staff. So we want to make this. We want you to do your audit, but we want this to be efficient. So if you give us the heads up as to what numbers you want to look at, we'll arrange for those numbers to be present so that you can have a look at it. But the obvious question is, well, what if the gold's not there? What if the Bank of England has been up to all sorts of shenanigans? I mean, we gave the Bank of England 6 weeks advance notice to rig the sample on this non-random component. Now, prior to 2013. The Bank of England did not allow a random sample. So you could not walk into the Bank of England and just randomly say, without any forewarning, this is the bar that I want, and produce this bar. So you couldn't do that. Now, we negotiated prior to the audit for a random sample to be included in the audit, and this was expressed in communication directly between Reserve Bank of Australia officials and Bank of England officials, and the Bank of England says, well, we will now allow a random audit to occur. Now, so obviously a random sample is highly important, because you want to walk in there randomly and just say, show us what you got, and you just hope that they can walk in and produce the bars that they say you own and just produce them. So now, but what did the Bank of England actually say on email to our officials? They said, well, you can do a random sample, but the sample has to be in the vicinity of the non-random component. So if we've got 80 tons and we've said, okay, we're going to go check, 5 tons in this particular area, so here are the numbers, and these numbers are in a particular physical space of the vault. What the Bank of England said was, you can do a random sample, but the gold bars have to be close to physically where the non-random component is. Now, the problem with that is that that's number one, that's not a genuine random audit. But number two is, if you've got a series of serial numbers and the Bank of England says, okay, we're going to produce these numbers for you, and you can pick numbers that are close to this, well, if the Bank of England has been involved in some shenanigans around leasing and melting down gold, they can have a bit of a guess as to, well, which numbers the Australians may wish to request, and they can obviously just make sure that those numbers are ready to be inspected. And again, we gave the English enough time to rig the sample, the random component and the non-random component, because on the random component they said, it's not going to be completely random. We'll give you a window in which you can pick some random numbers, but outside of that window, we won't. They basically wanted control over the scope of the audit, the frequency. They basically said, because we're extremely busy, you can only be in the vault for 3 days. Now, I think, and this hasn't been confirmed, I think we were able to be in the vault for 5 days, not 3 days. But again, I used to work for Ernst & Young, one of the big accounting firms, auditing firms in the world. You never, the power has to be with the auditor, not the auditee. Now, we could have, the Reserve Bank could have had a independent third party to conduct the audit. They decided not to. So there's a whole host of international companies that have expertise in auditing gold. We could have paid that firm to go in and conduct the audit, or that didn't happen. We sent our own officials into the Bank of England, and whether they have the expertise to know exactly what types of questions to ask, who knows? But the auditee set the terms of the audit, and that to me is a fundamentally rigged audit. But it's still, even with a rigged audit, even with all these constraints around the random sample and the non-random component, the Reserve Bank will not release the audit report, even though under freedom of information, certain individuals who I've spoken to have asked for the audit report. They said, well, we can't do anything that would damage relations with the Bank of England. So my view is, well, let's just get the gold back to Australia, if it exists, and then let's just be completely transparent with the public. And if that pisses off the English, then who cares? As soon as we get a gold back, well, if the Bank of England gets upset with us, they can get upset with us. But no, we have this. We have a governor that lies on the record. We have a deputy governor that says the most fanciful statements to Parliament, which says when we lease, the gold doesn't move. No evidence of that. They can't prove it. And here's the other thing. when they went in front of Parliament, the chairman of the committee said that the Reserve Bank does not have to be under oath. I mean, the thing is, so imagine when you see testimony in front of Congress, everyone has to go under oath, and it's a criminal offence to lie to Congress. Well, they basically said when the Reserve Bank went in front of Parliament in February, the Reserve Bank does not have to go under oath. And so I actually followed this up with the Secretary of the committee, and I said, in the history of the Australian Parliament, has the Reserve Bank, because I mean, they said you don't have to be under oath, but it is still a serious offence to lie to the committee, and the committee may take, and this is the key question, the key word, may take action if you have found to provide misleading evidence to the committee. So I asked the committee secretariat, in the history of the Australian Parliament, has the Reserve Bank ever been referred to the House of Representatives for providing misleading or false evidence to the committee? And the answer is no. So they don't have to go on their oath. They've never been referred to. They've never been referred to the Committee for Investigation for providing false information or misleading information, and yet they say the most ridiculous things. Well, when we lease, the gold doesn't move, and there is no way they can prove that, because in 20 years they walked in once for 3 to 5 days, and they were not allowed to see the full 80 tons. So it's a completely ridiculous situation, but. The corruption of Australia's mainstream media in this country, no one wants to take this up. No one thinks that this is a serious issue and that something should be done about it. And so, we have mass propaganda protecting vested interests, protecting the Reserve Bank of Australia, and yet they claim that 80 tonnes is on the balance sheet, which is worth about $4 to $4.5 billion. Well, I mean, if there's any institutional investors looking at the Reserve Bank, I mean, look, I don't think you should be valuing the gold at $4 to $4.5 billion, because they can't prove that it's there.
This echoes in the U.S. We have Congressman Ron Paul, who has been calling for decades, for an audit of not only the Federal Reserve, but also people have been calling for an audit of the U.S.'s gold holdings that were supposedly in Fort Knox, and neither has occurred to the satisfaction of the public. It really does beg the question: is why are such important official assets that really belong to the people why is there no transparency around that? Why aren't these the people's assets, and there should be complete transparency around that?
True. Well, I mean, you had Secretary Mnuchin in, I think, 2017. He walked into Fort Knox. No cameras were allowed in, but he walked down and said the gold is safe. Well, if the gold is safe, send the cameras through. Send an independent order through. But from my information, and you may have better mail on this, Fort Knox hasn't been properly audited since the 1950s. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, well, why is that? Now, it's very interesting when you study Charles de Gaulle, the French president. I mean, in 1967. He sent a French military naval ship into the harbor of New York with $300 million American dollars on the ship, and basically said, this was before Nixon got off closed down the gold convertibility window in '71, and said, well, we want the gold, and basically there is rumors to suggest that de Gaulle knew that the Americans were running out of gold, and basically he wanted the gold. He wanted his gold, before it was too late, and that's why he sent the naval ship in, and the Americans were forced to give the gold. But then, obviously, when the British then said, "Well, we want our gold," the Americans didn't give the British the gold, and that was a default. And then, obviously, we had the closing down of the convertibility window by Nixon in '71. And we've had a fiat currency system, global system, since 1971. But no, I mean, there is something definitely fishy about, in terms of the gold market. I mean, the Russians are stockpiling gold, are stockpiling silver. The Chinese, I think, they've been stockpiling for a while, but since December of last year, they've started to ramp up their purchases of gold. I mean, there are some Western economists, some people here in Australia, who think that this stockpiling is just complete lunacy. I mean, it makes no economic sense. But someone ultimately has to be right. I mean, the West thinks that the gold, gold and silver doesn't play a role, and the US dollar will maintain its supremacy. But also, some people in the alternative media. I mean, Harry Dent. If you study Harry Dent's work, he still thinks that the dollar will maintain its world reserve currency status. But yet, the Russians and the Chinese and others have taken a completely opposing view, and they are spending billions of dollars about hoarding gold and silver. So someone has to be right. And when you look at the history of money, fiat currencies don't last. They always go back to their intrinsic value of zero because politicians and bureaucrats print too much of it. And I have to say personally, I mean, I was a very big supporter of Trump in the campaign. If you go back to the first presidential debate, what did he say? We have a big, fat, ugly bubble. Well, what did he tweet out on the weekend? Quantitative tightening was a disaster. Had we, gone with continued QE, the stock market would be up another 5 or 10% without inflation. Well, I don't understand what's happened to your president. I mean, has he been compromised? Was he lying in the first debate when he said there was a big, fat, ugly bubble? Because obviously the bubble has increased significantly under his watch. But no, something has happened with Trump, and because his views on these matters are completely opposing to what he was expressing, in terms of before the election. Now, I've heard rumors that, that he's working behind the scenes to get America's gold back. He's trying to take down the deep state, QAnon, all of this sort of stuff. But, I'm not entirely sure what's happening with the administration. But the recent messages from the president around quantitative easing are just, it's a continuation of the Obama policies. And, again, Obama promised change. The change didn't come. Trump promised change. So there are some things definitely that things have changed because of Trump. I'd say the wall on the southern border, and obviously the exposure of corruption in the FBI and the Justice Department. I think those are positive things. But on some of these other key matters, things seem to be traveling along in the same direction. And who made that observation? It was Vladimir Putin. Putin basically says it doesn't matter who's in the White House, the direction of American policy does not change, and that seems to be the way that things are traveling. And I think that's a very bad sign for Western civilization.
Well, it's a pretty sad day for Western journalism when you have to listen to the premier of Russia to hear something that sort of does a gut check with you on what's actually going on, because everything you've been talking about up till now that we've been hearing from official sources in the West doesn't pass the smell test. One of the things you did mention was about Russia and China stockpiling gold, and there's some other jurisdictions as well. We've heard from Rob Kirby and others that during the second half of 2018, and Jeff Clark was on it with the same thing, that Russia and others are divesting themselves of U.S. debt holdings at the same time. Do you see those as two sides of the same positioning and the risk reduction on their part?
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, so obviously, there's a whole host of people who have said that the US dollar, has a limited shelf life because of the monetary policies coming out of the US Federal Reserve, because of these significant deficits in terms of what Congress is producing. And Alan Greenspan just this past weekend gave an interview on CNBC that I listened to, and he's of the same view that these deficits are unsustainable, and it's going to lead to some form of inflation. Now, I think Ray Dalio has said that we could see in the next 2 years the US lose its reserve currency status. And that could lead to a falling of the value of the American dollar by about 30%. And obviously, one thing I think Americans don't particularly understand about Australia, and I think most Australians don't understand this, is so since 1788, Australia's military posture has been, we need a protector. We need a protector against people or potential rivals or enemies within our region. So from 1788 to 1942, it was the British. Now, when Churchill was under pressure from Hitler and the Nazis, he basically bailed on us to provide military protection for us. And we, the whole theory was that Singapore would stop the Japanese, and Singapore fell in 1942. So this was the Battle of Singapore. So once that happened, and the Japanese had the ability to penetrate the Australian mainland, and the British had bailed on us, well, we needed something else. So we switched to the Americans. So from 1942 to today, our protector is basically the United States. Now, no one, and I have contacts in the defense establishment. No one understands what happens when the American dollar collapses. Now, when I worked for a senator in 2012 to 13, we actually had a conversation about this, and I said, well, if the US dollar collapses, what does that mean? It means that the current level of spending that the Congress is pursuing, that's unsustainable. And if they have a currency crisis, they will have to dramatically slash federal government spending so that they can stop hyperinflation. Now, if the Congress does that, where will they cut? They will cut military spending. They will cut entitlements. Now, so the Americans are the policemen of the world. They have, I think what Ron Paul say, about 600 to 700 military bases around the world. If they have to cut spending, they will have to close some of those. They'll have to close some of those bases.
Yep.
They will have to withdraw assets from around the world. And the question I had to, the senator I was working for in 2013 was, well, the Australian question is, well, where does the Americans withdraw first? Do they draw from Central Asia or from East Asia or from Europe or from the Middle East? And what is the sequence of that withdrawal, and what is the pace? Because if now China, it is true to say, in 3,000-4,000 years, they have never invaded a country. So China doesn't have a historical impulse to invade other countries, unlike what the Japanese did in World War II. But if the American dollar loses its position and US military spending can't be kept to the current pace that it is, well, Australia will be faced with a similar 1942 situation, in that we will have no military protection, and we are basically open slather for any potential rival, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the Indonesians, or whoever the case may be, to do something to us, because there won't be Big Brother to be able to come and help us. So the question of the role of gold, the stability of the US dollar, it's just not a question of economics and wealth. It has a massive implications to Australian national security. And because you've got Keynesianism sort of as the dominant economic philosophy in Australia, most people don't understand how vital all of this is and how this can play in terms of the geopolitical position. But obviously, the Russians and the Chinese can see the dying days of the dollar, and one could argue that they are actually trying to bring the downfall of the dollar by the stockpiling of gold and silver that they are currently engaged in. There are theories out there that say that Saddam Hussein tried to sell oil in euros, and then that's why they knocked him off. Gaddafi tried to establish the gold dinar for Africa, and that's why they knocked him off. Now, Venezuela's been trying to sell the oil in non-US dollars. This is why there's increased attention from the Trump administration on taking out Venezuela. But yeah, someone ultimately is going to be correct in their assessment as to how the monetary system will play out, whether there'll be some sort of reset. Is the reset the SDR, as Jim Ricketts says? Is it a basket of goods? Is it the gold standard? How the case may be. But there is no positive signals from Congress that they're taking the dollar seriously. And also, and I've spoken to many politicians, many advisors, and I was even on the phone this morning with several MPs. I mean, there is not one voice in the Australian Parliament talking about the stability of the dollar. And we have a federal election coming up in the next 4 weeks. And it looks like that the socialists will be elected in Australia. And they will increase government spending, they will increase taxes. And as this housing market continues to collapse, because it's in the last month, things have gotten quite worse since we last spoke. If the banks get in trouble and they need a bailout, well, the people who I've spoken to, they've all said, the Reserve Bank will print. We will bail out the banks. We'll nationalise if we have to, or they may bail in deposits like they did with Cyprus. But I think it'll be more nationalisation that they'll pursue. Well, this all comes at the cost of the purchasing power of the Australian dollar, and a lot of people don't fully comprehend, what are the implications of this is. But yeah, if our dollar gets into trouble, how much gold we have is a very important question for our international creditors, because we have a record amount of foreign debt above $1 trillion, about 56-57% of gross domestic product. So we could have a dollar crisis in Australia because we have too much debt. Our creditors may lose confidence. And how do you restore confidence if you've got a failing dollar? It's gold. It is a hard asset of value. And we say on the Reserve Bank's balance sheet we have 80 tons. Well, I don't think people will trust that. With the stuff we've been able to expose about the Reserve Bank, I think they need to bring the gold back. They need to increase the level of gold that they have. They need to be much more transparent, and they need to give foreign creditors confidence that we will meet our foreign debt obligations. Number one, but number two is if we have any hiccups along the way with our debt position, well, we have hard assets that are worth something. I mean, the bulk of the Reserve Bank's reserves is in foreign exchange. We have SDRs. We have a couple of other sort of forms of assets, but the gold portion is about $4.5 billion, and that should be a lot larger. Now, we've got a federal election coming up. There's not one party running for parliament, from the majors to the minors, that have a formal gold policy. No one has a formal Reserve Bank policy. No one really understands this. And so, I've done a few things on this. I'll do a few more things throughout this year. But no, look, there needs to be a much more concerted effort about the importance of gold, bringing it back, giving our foreign creditors confidence, ensuring that we have a stable dollar. Because I was telling parliamentarians 18 months ago that if the socialists get in and their leader is Bill Shorten, we could have a dollar crisis. He could turn our dollar into confetti, and that's obviously very bad news for a whole host of Australians who don't have sufficient monetary insurance and could see, so the cost of living is the number one issue in Australia already, but it could exacerbate much worse if we have a reckless government who doesn't prudently manage the money and prudently manage federal finances.
John, you've opened up a lot of new territory for us that I had not heard of before, the vulnerability of Australia to the loss of confidence if it doesn't have repatriation of its gold, and the vulnerability militarily of Australia if the U.S. dollar fails and we have to withdraw our military presence. We've been speaking with John Adams, Chief Economist at GoodAsGold Australia. John, I see we're up against the hour. If people want to find out more of your work and your articles, they can find them at adamseconomics.com. Great. Thank you for joining us here the second time on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you for having me.
With surprising new concerns expressed about Dunnigan's changing hairstyle, one viewer even commented that hair is dyed, fried, and laid to the side. But what you're not being told is Dunnigan's hair needs no dye thanks to the wonderful vitamin and mineral regimen that Melody recommends, and is not laid to the side to cover any bald spot either, since Dunnigan's full head of hair is exceptionally well attached. However, Dunnigan does use hair products only as a disaster prevention because he's at severe risk of catastrophic emergency situations. But although there may be some changes you don't like to hair, this is one kind of change you'll definitely want to have on hand if the situation gets hairy. Pure silver. And for a limited time, your first ounce of silver can be purchased at spot price with free shipping on orders over $99 by going to sdbullion.com/rp. And you'll be supporting Reluctant Preppers as well. It's within your grasp to get your hands on the perfect change for hairy situations at sdbullion.com/rp. P.S. Dunnigan was not harmed in the making of this video. Hey, Reluctant Preppers. If you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.